ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षण हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति। हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामच्युतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्। Namo Ramana. In this Friday Atma Vichara session from Ramanacentre for Bengaluru, we have been reading Bhagavan's Upadesham and meditating on it. And we have been reading his Upadesham from the book Ramana Answers, Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950. This book is a compilation by our founder president Sri A.R. Natarajan ji, wherein he has compiled all the questions put to Bhagavan by various devotees on the subject matter of self-enquiry, Atma Vichara, and between the period 1900 to 1950, and Bhagavan's answers for them. So we have been looking at the question and answers put to Bhagavan between the year 1936 to 1950, and we have reached the 113th question in the book, and we will meditate on it by Bhagavan's grace today, and then we will have a 20 minutes practice of Atma Vichara. Then today Nandakumar ji will be talking about Atma Vichara, perhaps from talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, and then we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. Oh, I understand Sarada would be talking. So, then Sarada would be talking about self-enquiry from Ramana Gita. She has been meditating on Bhagavan's answers to various devotees, which has been captured in Ramana Gita by Ganapati Muni, which also is on the subject matter of self-enquiry. So the 113th question today is, devotee asks, I appear to get the same stillness of thought by tracing the root of the mantra which I repeat, as I would if I put the who am I enquiry. Is there any harm in my continuing the mantra in this manner, or is it essential I should only use who am I? I repeat the question. I appear to get the same stillness of thought by tracing the root of the mantra which I repeat, as I would if I put the who am I enquiry. Is there any harm in my continuing the mantra in this manner, or is it essential I should only use who am I? So this is a question, and Bhagavan's answer, let us look at it. No, you can trace the root of any thought or mantra and continue to do so till you have an answer to your query. Here Natarajan ji has highlighted this part. Do so, that means continue to trace the root until you have an answer to your query. That part has been highlighted by A.R. Natarajan ji. So I repeat Bhagavan's answer. No, you can trace the root of any thought or mantra and continue to do so till you have an answer to your query. So the question here The questioner is asking that I do a mantra japa, and from using the root of that mantra japa, I experience peace. Now, the same peace I will experience if I put the enquiry, who am I? So, is there any harm in tracing the root of the mantra, or should I switch over to the enquiry, who am I? Is the question. Now, in the hidden between this question is the state where there is a doubt. There is a questioner, there is a doubter. And where is that doubter? Obviously, is not in that stillness. When we experience stillness, as in deep sleep, where there is no mantra or no enquiry, obviously there is no doubts also. It's only when thoughts are running, then we have all these doubts. So similarly here, we should see that part, that though the questioner is saying here that I am experiencing the stillness by tracing the root of the mantra as I do, as similar to the way I experience that stillness when I inquire, who am I? So, is there any harm that I can continue to do the mantra, or should I switch over to who am I? There are two things, as I said here. The first thing is that when there is stillness, there is obviously no doubt. But whenever at the time of questioning, obviously that stillness is missing, therefore the doubter is. And the second important thing is the sense of doership. Nachurana very beautifully says, we as sadhakas, we may go to any sadhana. Our first and foremost, if you look at how our mind would be seeking it, we would like to the other person to give me something to do or something to know. That means, in essentially what Bhagavan says is, the mind wants the attention to be on something else, not on it. So, even though it has gone to find out to do the sadhana, it tries to put the attention on the something else so that it can continue to do or continue to ask, after this, what should I do? After knowing this, what should I know? In a way, it wants to stay alive, kicking, and continue to do its Galata. And Bhagavan gives a very beautiful story narrating this. I'll try to quickly summarize that. Wherein he says there is a bridegroom who is coming for the marriage, and they are arriving through a train, and next to the bridegroom's father stands this man with well dressed up with a tie and everything. And the bride people think that he should be somebody very important from the groom's side. Therefore, he is standing next to the groom's father. And as soon as the train stops and they all get down, then the same gentleman comes and stands next to the bride's father. And the groom's people think that he's perhaps a very important person on the bride's side. And then they all go into the marriage, and everybody is happy with the arrangements and the way things are going. But this guy is the only one who is going on complaining that something is not right. From the day they stepped into the marriage hall, almost every event he would have something to complain about, something to ask, something to know, something to object. And then finally the marriage happens despite all of it. And when they finally have the last break, lunch or something, when the groom's father and the bride's father are sitting next to each other, Then one of them starts the conversation and asks, "Who is this gentleman belonging to your family who is going on cribbing about everything? Though the marriage went very well, this gentleman is going on cribbing." And then the groom's father says, "I don't know. I thought he's somebody important in your family." And then they come to know that he neither belongs to them, to each of them. So then he recognizes this conversation, understands that he is going to be caught, and he runs away from the marriage hall. And Bhagavan, in a way, is saying this mind is, or the ego is like this. As Bhagavan says, that it ties the jada, all these mind, body, and all of this jada to the consciousness, as though it is mine. The entanglement happens. So whenever it'll always, in this entanglement, in this marriage of the mind and the body doesn't say I. It is not complaining much, except if you give it some food, it is largely content. Then the consciousness is also very happy. It is also not raising any concern. But in between this ego, which identifies with the body at times as though I am this, and it identifies with the consciousness with at times I can know, I can do, or I can understand. And it keeps switching between the groom and the bride party. And it is not happy with this marriage. Though the body is silent, though the consciousness is still, this ego goes on complaining. It's a wonderful story to depict what happens within us. Only when the both of them inquire together, that the ego, the body doesn't say I, neither does the consciousness, which is in whose light everything is happening, doesn't say I. It is still, it's just like the sun, completely shining, always shining, whether there is sleep, whether there is dream or the waking state. It is giving light to all three of them, and it is aware of all three of them, and it is not making any comment, neither asking to do anything in the sleep or in the waking or in the dream. It is simply like the sun shining, and in its presence all things are happening. So it also doesn't say I, the body also doesn't say I, but in between these two, this ego rises and does all the tamasha, all the things. So here it is the same thing. So when there is stillness, when the stillness is experienced, when we trace the root of the mantra, the root of the who am I, what do I refer to as I? When I trace it back, that stillness is there. There, the light, the pure presence shining continuously, unbroken, will be experienced as the stillness, because there is no thoughts there. But the answer is not found. That is the nature of oneself. That is why when we leave that, and we still continue to hold that I am this body, or I am this consciousness entangled with this body, this false sense of identity or the duality which is there, then we see that the stillness is vanished at this point in time. Therefore, what should I do, or whether should I use this sadhana or that sadhana? But we forget to identify what is my real nature. What is my real nature? We forget that is the sole purpose of the inquiry. Not to find any answer. The answer is to find out the nature. Therefore, the inquiry has to be put. As long as we are still holding on to, okay, the stillness happens when I go to the root of the mantra, the stillness happens when I inquire, so I need to do this to experience that. So still the attention is outward turned on the knowing or the doing. But for whom? For whom is this understanding? That is why Bhagavan says the enquiry, what it does is neti, 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 the knowing, the doing, whatever there is the knowing, whatever is the doing, we keep on dropping it, the enquiry, until we figure out my entanglement with all this knowing and doing, with this duality which rises. Until there is no duality, how can I know? Until there is no duality, how can I do anything? So this is how I get entangled in this duality, and that duality will never give me that stillness. But in that stillness, there is no duality, and therefore that is the state of Advaita. And therefore, that is the answer that I have been seeking for. That is my natural state. All I need to do is, no matter whatever drags my attention in duality, I should diligently inquire, to whom is this? Who am I? And get back to that stillness which is natural to me. I should not get entangled with this seemingly appearing duality, because a thought appears for a moment, after that it is gone. The body, though it continues to appear, we know that it is not the same body, even in a biological sense, and we know that it is not going to be there always. So therefore, many objects may have their own lifespan of appearance and disappearance, but for whom is they all appearing and disappearing? And therefore, by inquiring that, we find ourselves to be that which is ever present. And when that alone has manifested us everything, we then figure out that also. Whatever objects which are appearing, is all appearing from it, disappearing into it. So they are all staying in that, and that alone is. And that is stillness. When there is no divisions anymore, then the stillness alone remains as our fullness, our nature. So until we find that true answer to our query, Bhagavan says, keep on tracing it to the root, because the root is the real answer, the root of the mantra, the root of the enquiry, who am I and what do I refer to as I, is the real answer. Until there becomes a clear recognition that in that answer, there is no more duality, no more knowing, no more doing, no more of all of this thing. So then what we can say, like in sleep, we consciously sleep to all movements. Movements may happen, but we will be consciously sleeping to it. We therefore continue to experience that stillness alone, which is completely not affected by whatever movements of the mind, body, world may happen, until that becomes our natural state, which is until we become naturally identified with that natural state. We should keep on doing the enquiry to move the attention, which is habituated to moving to duality, to moving it back to that oneness. That is the Atma Vichara. So Bhagavan says, no matter how many thoughts come, no matter whatever is the nature of the thought, whether it is good, bad, ugly, or spiritual, they are all objects to us. And therefore the duality exists. And if we get entangled into duality, then all knowing, doing, is it right, is it wrong, all doubts, everything rise along with it. So our diligence should be in inquiring, to whom is this? Then the answer will come. It is for me. No matter what is the nature of the duality that is out there, it is all appearing to me, whether it is gross or subtle. And then by inquiring, who am I, and tracing the root from which those thoughts have arisen, then we get back to that non-dual state, that state of stillness. And we figure out that is the answer. In the midst of all change, there is that the changeless one, or the changeless one alone is seemingly appearing as changing. Therefore, that is me. Until it becomes our natural state, Bhagavan says we should diligently inquire. The abundant grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path. For the next 20 minutes, let us practice Atma Vichar. Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Now, over to Sarada.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. With the immense grace of the self, shining as Ramana, we in this part of the satsang are meditating on the verses of Ramana Gita and the light which they throw on our practice of self-enquiry. We are now meditating on the chapter 12, which is Shakti Vicharaha. And Karshni has asked Bhagavan a few questions, and now he is asking Bhagavan, Ishwarasya tu ya Shaktihi Gita Vedanta Vedibihi Asti Vachalanam Tasyam Aho Svinnathanastiva. The power which is power of Ishvara, which is described in Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas, Vedanta Vedibihi, is that still or is it dynamic? Is it static or is it dynamic? Is there a movement in this? Is there a Shakti in this power? The question arises because for most of us, there is this dichotomy between movement and stillness, between consciousness and existence. Bhagavan, that's why in Upadesha Saram, he says, Sattaya hi chit, chittaya hyaham. So Sat and Chit, Shiva and Shakti, Ishvara and the power, existence and consciousness are actually inseparable. They are not two. Nanda Kumarji pointed out to the explanation by Lakshmana Sharma, wherein he says, supposing Sat and Chit were independent of each other. Existence and consciousness were independent of each other. That which exists may not be conscious, and then it would be no use. What is the use of existence without consciousness of existence? If one is not conscious that one exists, it is as good as being non-existent. And if there is no existence, what is the use of consciousness? What would consciousness do without being existent itself? So existence and consciousness have to be intertwined with each other. I don't know whether Rajesh Kumarji has intentionally put up his hand. If it is so, we will look at it after the last prayer. So the point is that the existence and consciousness are one actually, but they appear to be two. In one of the verses of Anmabodham, which Bhagavan has translated, it is pointed out to us that we first divide existence and consciousness, and then we appear to unite it, saying, I know. So I am separate, knowing is separate, knowing is consciousness, awareness, that is consciousness. So I know, I am separate, independent. I am not knowledge. But the truth is that I am knowledge. It is not that I know or I do not know or I need to know or I do not need to know. So, knowledge and existence are cut apart by us. Therefore, the question arises, which Kapali is putting over here, is Ishvara's Shakti dynamic or static? The other reason why such a question may arise is because, see, movement for us or dynamic, something dynamic for us is associated with movement. And movement is associated with space and time. But in the self, which is everywhere, where will the self move to? How can the self move anywhere when it is everywhere? If we are limited entities, we can move from one place to another. Therefore, the self is denoted as being achala, unmoving, absolutely still. But does being absolutely still mean that it is powerless? It is incapable of something that is dynamic, the power aspect. This is the question of Kapali. And Bhagavan says, Shakti Sanchalanadeva Lokanam Tata Sambhavaha Chalastu Na Sanchalati Karhachit. Bhagavan says that it is because of the movement of the power that the world comes into being. So there is without movement, there cannot be duality, there cannot be multiplicity. Achalasya tu yachakte chalanam loka karanam tameva chakshate mayam anirvachyam vipaschitaha. So this power of that achala tattva, that unmoving self, which is perfectly still, which does not move, achalastu yes chaktes chalanam loka karanam, that power of the self which is unmoving, that power which moves and thereby creates a world, that power is called Maya. It is called an illusion. It is called an appearance. Anirvachyam vipaschitaha. See, that is, it cannot be explained. It is called an indescribable illusion. Now, how can that which is unmoving move? How can that in which there is no duality appear to be dual and multiple? But because we presume that we are seeing a multiple world, that this multiplicity exists, therefore we are told that this multiplicity is occurring on account of the Shakti of that non-dual power, and we cannot explain how this happens. So Bhagavan says that is anirvachyam, that is inexplicable. So it is not of much use in our practice to question. There are people who question, why this Maya? Why this illusion? Why does it arise? Why does that Shakti of God create this illusion? Now, in our sadhana, such a question is a waste, because that which cannot be explained need not be explored, one point. Secondly, okay, if we accept or if we concede or if we presume that we are laboring under an illusion, what should we do? We should try to come out of that illusion. We should try to break the illusion. What is the point of wondering where from the illusion came? Because remaining within the illusion, if we ask such a question, if we ask where from this Maya, that question and the answer would all be only within the realm of the Maya. So there is no point talking about Maya. There is no point cogitating or meditating on illusion. There is only meaning in cogitating on or talking about or meditating on the reality. Therefore, we are told that is inexplicable. Get back to the truth. Okay. But if we don't, so what Bhagavan says is Chanchalatvam Vishayino Yatharthamiva Bhasate Chalanam Nanarashreshta Swarupasya tu Vastutaha. The movement is taken to be real. This movement is taken to Chanchalatvam Vishayino Yathartham Iva Bhasate. Bhasate, it appears. The movement of all the objects in the world, the movement of our thoughts, which are actually representatives of the objects in the world, which are symbols, which are actually, they are only the movement, only the thoughts are the world. That movement appears to be a reality. However, Chalanam nanarashreshta swarupasya tu vastutaha. There's no movement at all in the self. All this talk of the power, the dynamism, the movement being from the power of the self. See, when we look at our thoughts, and then there appear to be thoughts, there appears to be a movement. And then we ask ourselves, from where? From where does this movement come? The answer has to be that this movement is coming from a source, all powerful source, and the light, because each of the thoughts is jada. There is no light in the thoughts. The thoughts do not have any life or light of their own. What are these thoughts? They are just images. They are images of consciousness, like images in a movie are images of light. These are images of the light called consciousness. So apart from the light, where do they exist? And where is the movement? The movement exists because we see ourselves as separate from the object, and our attention moves from one object to another. When such a movement of attention is there, there appears to be movement of objects. But the objects being jada, how can they move? They do not move. There is no chalana, and there is no chalana of the objects, there is no chalana of the truth. Therefore, it is called an illusion. Ishvarasya cha shaktescha bhedo drishti nimittakaha mithunam tvidamekam syat drishtischet upasamhrita. Ishvarasya cha shaktescha bhedaha bheda drishti nimittakaha. Because of the bheda drishti, because we see things as dual, we see ourselves and the world as separate. Because of this sense of separateness, because of the separateness between subject and object that we have created, we see that Ishvara and his Shakti are separate from one another. When the I merges back into its source, then what happens when the mind merges in the source? Drishtischet upasamhrita. There is only one. The dual appearance, the dual perspective completely vanishes. So, what is the sadhana which Bhagavan is giving to us? He says, let us not see this Shakti, this power of the self as apart from it. Let us not see it as apart and get entwined in its illusion, get captured in the fact as if, doing is so powerful, knowing is so powerful, experiencing is so powerful. But what is being? Being, actually, only being is powerful. There is no acting, there is no knowing, there is no experiencing, there is no kartrutva, bhoktrutva, there is no jnatritva, there is none of these exist apart from this self. And none of these are worthwhile either, because they have no power apart from this self. So instead of giving force to action in the form of, instead of giving power to action, instead of giving power to thought, instead of giving significance to all this, let us give significance to the source and merge back there, is what Bhagavan is indicating in his answer to Kapali. The questions progress further from here. We will, by His grace, meditate on them whenever the next opportunity arises. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. Apara Satchit Sukhabarirashe Yasyornimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabhiram Chintavihinam Hrudi Chintayami Chintavihinam Hrudi Chintayami. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana, Namo Ramana.